Dear church, let's talk about church culture. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. I'm excited every week about our guests. I'm really excited about having my friend Stephen Sutton on. Stephen, I got a lot of friends. I say that every week. I got my friend on here and all that, but you and I have been recent friends. We connected a couple months ago, and I think it was a whole David and Jonathan thing without the kissing, right?
That's it. We enjoyed ourselves. Had a great time.
We did. We were at a conference speaking in Atlanta or close to Atlanta, and you talked about the subject that we're going to discuss this podcast. And I really wanted to have you on because I loved what you had to say. And it's kind of a forgotten piece sometimes. I think we all have a church culture wherever we attend or preach or serve, but I don't know that it's always something that we think about, or maybe even something that we're always intentional about, and that is identity and culture. Who are we? What are we about? I mean, obviously we're the church and we're about loving God and loving others, but there's more to it than that. And you did a really good job of presenting that. And so I want to discuss that this morning. Before we do that though, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're in Dyersburg, Tennessee, but tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, how things are going there.
Yeah, I'm born and raised here in West Tennessee, and married to Whitney in 2010. And we have two 4-year-olds, which means we have twins. So we have a boy and a girl that we're raising in Crockett County, is where we live, just about 15 minutes from the church here where we preach. And I'm also an EMS director and in the county where I grew up. So I'm a paramedic as well, and preach here at West Dyersburg. Whitney's a pre-K teacher, and she's been doing that for about 12 years or so now. So we make our home over here in West Tennessee, and thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be with you this morning.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you've done a little bit of everything. You were a helicopter pilot at one point, and, you've kind of had your hands in a lot of different things, hadn't you?
Yeah, we did some flight medicine for about 8 years, and worked in senior leadership for an ambulance company, and, just trying to settle back down here and continue to make our home, more localized, not much traveling. Not as much traveling as we used to engage in. So we like being at home on the farm and watching the kids dig around in the dirt, drive their little power wheels around the yard,
I got it. Yeah, there's something I'm going to have to get used to, because I think most of our listeners know that I'm making a move to Tennessee in a couple of months, be in Dixon, Tennessee, not far from you, which is going to be fun. But one thing I've noticed about Tennesseans, you'll always tell the county you're from. And that's confusing to me because you said born and raised in Crockett County. I do know Crockett County because it's not far from where I grew up. But I talk to guys from Tennessee and they'll, born and raised in Martin County, all that. That doesn't help me any. I don't know where that's at, right? So I've got to learn to tell people I'm going to be from Dixon County, right? That's
Well, y'all have a couple of big cities there in Texas, and either you're close to them or close to another one, but we just have a lot of small farming communities here in West Tennessee. I'm 70 miles north of Memphis, Chris.
There you go. That's it. I love it.
Hey, we're looking forward to having you a little bit closer over here, and we're excited about being closer geographically and the work that God will do through you and the church here. We're just excited about it, and we welcome you. We welcome you.
It's going to be fun. I wish that our listeners and viewers could see Stephen outside of this kind of realm, because he is a hilarious human being and very much a cut up. And so some of that will come out, I'm sure, in this discussion, but, fun loving guy for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying real hard to behave this morning.
Well, don't try too hard. So Stephen, let's jump in. Why is a church culture, well, maybe you could start at just culture in business or anything. Why is that important? Why is an organizational culture important?
Well, it is very important. And like you said, Chris, it doesn't get a lot of airtime, and maybe we just kind of unintentionally deal and dabble maybe in church culture. But I think it's time we get real serious and intentional about creating the kind of culture that we wish to work within. Every organization, including the church, has a culture. And so this isn't just a C-suite topic. This isn't just a senior leadership topic or a corporate topic. I mean, you've heard someone say, that organization's toxic, or that agency's toxic,
right?
Or maybe even that church is toxic. I don't know if I've ever heard that, but it would hurt my heart. I try not to refer to culture as toxic. I try to say it's either healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah.
But culture is basically just how we do things here. How do we do things at West Dyersburg, and how do we do things in Dixon, and how do you do things at the church in Texas? And so it's the atmosphere in which the church functions. It's spoken and unspoken messages. It's observable artifacts, and maybe it's cues that aren't as observable. Maybe they're more subtle. And so if the culture is healthy, then people look forward to being there, and growth occurs, and great leaders step up and stay, and the church becomes this super attractive organism, and it's able to accomplish her mission in evangelism. It's able to bring glory to God. And so great cultures drive outstanding group performance. And why is it that some groups perform better than other groups?
Yeah.
And the sum of their members is better and adds more value. Well, it's culture. And it's the reason why, well, look here. It's the reason maybe why we choose to, get breakfast at Chick-fil-A versus getting a breakfast at McDonald's. It's the reason why you might be loyal to Holiday Inn and Southwest Airlines. It's why some families can't enjoy others' company, and it's the reason why some families are always together enjoying life. And so, culture is how we do things here, and whether they're intentional and focused, or whether they're unconscious and unspoken, and somehow, well, most of the time, unconscious and unspoken, they'll be misunderstood.
Yeah.
And so culture just puts it out there. So I can't emphasize the importance of culture enough in the Lord's church.
Yeah, you said something a while ago that I've often said. I've kind of had to revise it a little bit, but I've always said that the church is an organism, not an organization. Obviously, there's organization with the church, but by and large, our identity is an organism, not a institution. Meaning that as an organism, we move and we change and we adapt and all those kind of things. And I think that is a huge part of our culture, is being able to adapt and adjust, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's super important. And, the things that maybe we used to do 20, 30 years ago, to reach the lost. I mean, they're not necessarily evil or bad today. There's more opportunities. And just like this podcast, I mean, who would have thought 30 years ago that we would be able to send this thing out? I mean, and publish information that would help churches, and and how we go, and I think about the church as constantly changing our methods and looking at the opportunities, and basically just asking the question, what does God want us to be? And if someone, if they don't like the way that we do things here, instead of just discharging that individual and saying, well, they're from Texas, they're not used to the church culture, in Tennessee. I mean, that really adds no value to the organization.
Right.
If you assign blame to someone else, but instead saying, I wonder what is it about our culture that, that Chris didn't feel like he could be a member here.
Yeah.
And what was it about our church culture that Chris felt like he could be more faithful or be more engaged, across the street or across town or in another county? What was it? What is it about our team, our ministry team, that Chris didn't feel welcome and engaged and feel like he could bring his full 5 talents to the table, And so I think those are the questions, that really add value. And when you ask those questions, you can't help but look at your culture and how you're and modulate and change so that you're improving. And so it's not really, what can we do that's different than, the church down the street or the church in another county, but it's asking the questions that make us a better, healthier church.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so with that, I want to ask you this. What are some marks of a healthy church culture? I think you just said one of them, which is being able to evaluate yourselves constantly, asking those important questions, who are we, what are we about, kind of thing. What other aspects are there to a healthy church culture?
Well, I like what Daniel Coyle had to say about this, and he outlines it in a beautiful way in his book, Culture Code. And if you're even halfway interested, or if this podcast piques your interest, then Culture Code is a must read for you. It's probably the only book that I've ever read, Chris, that when I got through reading it, I just went right back to the front and read it again.
Wow.
And it just was a powerful aha moment for me, because I felt like that, just for me personally, Chris, I felt like that I've wasted some years in ministry that I could have maybe spent in a better way by building a healthier church culture. But when you look at what Daniel has to say, belonging cues
Yeah.
that tell people you're safe. Man, how important is that
That
in the
is
Lord's
huge.
church?
Yeah.
Where we're telling people from the very first second that they're on our property, even before they get here, you belong here, you're safe here. There is nothing that God cannot forgive. And this safety net, it acts as a glue that bonds people together. And we're sending those belonging cues consistently. And so we're signaling to people what it means to be part of this group, and how, God is in charge here and Jesus is the head of the church here. And we reinforce these: you're fine here, you're good here.
Yeah.
And so that safety and connection, it creates the foundation. If you don't have this safety, then there's not going to be the risk sharing and the open debate and communication and learning that we will expect to have in small groups.
Yeah.
And so that safety then is that glue that says, you know what, we can be real here.
Yeah.
How important is that in the church?
Yeah. Authenticity. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we do real. And
Mm-hmm.
so the risk sharing and the back and forth and the open communication and learning. And so, I think these subtle cues, they affect our responses and our decisions more than the content that's being communicated. What Now, Daniel's writing this maybe for corporate leaders, but what does that mean for me and you? I'll read that again. So we're preachers. These subtle cues affect this is his quote, not mine, our responses and decisions
Okay.
more than the content being created. That tells me I can have the greatest preacher in the whole wide world where I go to church, where I worship.
Mm-hmm.
But if my culture is unhealthy and there's no safety, there will be no response. There will be no decisions made, because people do not feel safe sharing that risk and making those decisions. And that culture is more important than the content being communicated.
For sure.
And that's just one. If you think about culture being a three-legged stool, that's just one of the legs, is that safety. Daniel says the second thing is sharing vulnerability. So you got the safety piece, the glue,
Yeah.
and then now members show weakness and they share feedback and they can embrace hard truths and they can share the risk. And so this creates a foundation of trust that acts as the muscles for cooperation.
Okay.
So now we're coming together. We're forming in the stages of group dynamics. We're coming together. We're forming, and so we're sending these belonging cues, and we're communicating effectively, and we're being good listeners, and we're addressing negative issues in person. We're asking good questions. We're using all the right language, and so we're cultivating understanding, and we're sharing this mental model. And Daniel says, this is his words, not mine. Back to your point a minute ago, he said, over time, they build a shared mental model and operate like a single organism.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't that the Lord's Prayer in John 17?
Absolutely.
And so we've got this sense of mutual need through this shared vulnerability. And that's shared vulnerability. That's not just one person being vulnerable. That's Stephen feeling safe, being vulnerable, Chris feeling safe and being vulnerable. Instead of Stephen sharing, saying, I really struggle with sin A, B, C. And you say, well, I did that for you, bud, but I'm good. I'm doing, me and the Lord, listen, we've got a thing and we got it going on. Well, you miss an opportunity to share vulnerability and say, it's interesting that you bring that up, because that is something that really I've struggled with for a long time, or whatever. So whatever the piece is. And then the third thing, and I love this, especially with regard to us, is establishing a purpose.
Gotcha.
Establishing a purpose. It's like having a compass to show where we are and where we want to be. Our mission is where we are, what we're doing. Our vision is what we want to be.
Yeah.
And so this group now is coming together. They're proficient. They're using blueprints. Imagine how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
When you're modeling the life of Christ. You're building creativity. I mean, you got all the things going on here, and you're capturing these key values and principles, and you're telling people about the standards and the behaviors that that are the guidelines and the guardrails for how we behave in this organism, in the
Yeah.
church. So the attitude, speech, and behavior of Christ is being modeled through that shared purpose. And so I think those are. I think the question was, key components to building a strong culture. And I can't agree with what I can't. There's nothing I could say to improve upon what Daniel said. When you look at that through the eyes of a preacher, a church leader, an elder, a deacon, I mean, it's powerful.
No
It's
doubt.
powerful and has the ability to really change the church in a positive way, where those responses and decisions are being made that affect the eternal trajectory and destination of people's souls.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the challenge that comes, because it's a volunteer group and the volunteers get a vote. So that makes it all the more difficult when you're trying to establish a culture and an identity. Maybe from personal experience and then from also studying the topic, what have you found to be the most effective ways in order to meet those challenges and help people to get on board? Because I know, being a coach, you're always trying to establish a culture, and the culture is all fine and good. What you say is all fine and good, but if it doesn't produce results, you lose people, you lose your players. So talk a little bit about that. How can you overcome some of those obstacles?
I think two things, Chris: belonging and becoming.
Okay.
Belonging and becoming. Jesus didn't spend all of his time rather telling people what they were. By and large, all of us know what we are.
Mm-hmm.
What we don't know is what we could become in the kingdom if we would just give his model a chance. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time. And we see these challenging conversations. So, I've heard your appeal for funds. I want to join this campaign. Jesus is in town. Everything's great. And, sorry. Excuse me, I got this phone call. My father just passed away. And Jesus said, oh, well, no big deal. Listen, you go take care of that and let us know if you need anything. We'll get some baked beans. And he said, let the dead bury their dead.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you say something like that to someone that you want to join your campaign? Or, hey, Jesus, I want to go with you. And Jesus said, well, hey, you need to know this, that the foxes have holes, the birds have a nest, but the Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay his head.
Yeah.
And how do we take these challenges that Jesus is offering people to make a real decision about following him? I mean, once we make the decision to follow him, then a lot of the other decisions are already made.
Yeah.
But in the corporate world, Chris, you hire, promote, reward, and model the culture that you wish to see. And so everything is about that. We're looking for people that match the culture and are going to be a cultural fit. And I tell my staff and I tell, our personnel committee, is it okay not to hire someone simply because they are not a good cultural fit?
Yeah.
That's something that we look at. Now, can we help them? Can we invite them into our healthy culture and challenge them? Absolutely. And the church does that every day. And so to the preachers, elders, deacons, I say model and change the culture that you wish to see in the church. And as our responsibility as ministers and elders, I mean, we design the system, the framework that the members work within. And if it's not important to us, it's not important to them. And if we're not modeling the culture and sending those belonging cues and sharing that vulnerability and establishing purpose in the group and casting a vision, and that vision that we cast, it draws people to it. It draws people in of where we're going. We want to take Africa for Christ. We want to take Australia for Christ. Yes. And I want to take Dyer County for Christ.
Yeah.
And that we're casting that vision of what we're trying to do. And so what others say about the church where you attend has a lot to do about the culture,
Agreed.
And so you could just listen, they say, oh, they just do so much. They serve so selfishly. It's never about them. It's always about others. They're so generous. They're so considerate of newcomers. Man, they know how to make it happen down there at that church. They make everything better. They own the town, not in a bad way, but they they're ready for every good work. And so, we're called upon to be the best neighbors. And if that's the case, then the church ought to be the best neighbor. And if the West Dyersburg Church ceased to exist in our community, would the people here know or care?
Yeah.
Well, I would hope that they would.
Yeah.
But the culture that you embody and you create, it may make the difference whether or not they will miss the church or care if something were to happen to it. And so, culture determines how this organization behaves and feels to those that walk into it. So how does it feel? Well, listen carefully. An unhealthy organizational culture has the potential to kill a great organizational mission. Now, that's in the corporate world. What does that mean in the church? An unhealthy organizational culture has the power to kill a great organizational mission. What's the organizational mission of the church?
Yeah.
Evangelism.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
And the church doesn't have enough money to pay members and guests to attend in a church culture that they hate.
Yeah.
You're talking about your volunteers. I mean, and how do we know that? Because there are companies that do not have enough money to pay their employees to come to a job that they hate. And so it's important what we believe in this organization, the church, as we unite upon, the Bible, but it's equally important how we behave. And that church culture, in a lot of ways, is how we behave. It's our speech, it's our attitude, it's those belonging cues. It's whether or not we're going to scoot over and tell those people, you belong here and you can become here.
Yeah.
And culture helps us resolve conflict. When you look at, church leadership and the value that healthy church culture brings. I mean, churches who are conflicted rarely grow. In fact, it's almost a death sentence. And so, God's people ought to be the best at resolving conflict, but sometimes we're not as good as we need to be, even in spite of the biblical directives. And so, if churches are unwilling to change their bad culture, they often have a justification for every suggestion for improvement that comes their way.
Right.
They have a reason, and a really good reason, why they're doing what they're doing, but yet failing so bad at it.
Agreed.
So,
Yes.
I don't want to fail, and I don't want to go to you mentioned being a coach, I don't want to go to the Super Bowl and be the quarterback and the coach look at me and say, you ready for the game? And say, yeah. I say, well, where's your football? So, well, I don't have any footballs. I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get to the Super Bowl. I don't want to get to the big event and lose.
Yeah.
I want to win and I want to pass the test. And through God's grace and His working through us and our church culture to help us with our organizational mission and helping the leaders of the church to help people belong and become.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned that a couple of times. I just think it's super important.
Oh, I think it is too. I appreciate you talking about that. I think, as a coach, I felt like that a lot of the team's personality was going to be driven by the coach, that they kind of take on your personality. If I'm yelling and screaming at the refs all the time, that's what's going to kind of be accepted. And they're going to look at me as to how the culture is going to be and how it's going to act and all that. And I think it's the same way with preaching. I think by and large, the congregation's going to kind of take on the mentality of what's coming out of the pulpit, I think there's obviously some caveats to that, but I think a lot of it is dependent on the preaching and how he sets the tone and the climate. Do you agree with that? And then along with that, what do you do, not just in the pulpit, but with the leadership? How do you interact with them in order to set the culture?
Well, I do agree because whether we like it or not, we are, the voice of the church where we preach in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't want that to sound in a negative way. I don't mean it in a bad way, Chris, but, you maybe have the voice of the, Alabama or the voice of the Tennessee Vols or the Gators.
Absolutely.
But, and many times we are the voice that goes out from the pulpit of the places where we preach. And, we always say, meanness is not soundness. But if every time I step in the pulpit, I bring my 2x4 and it's whack-a-mole and mean, then don't be surprised when your members are conflicted and their families are in disarray. I mean, a relationship's a relationship. It doesn't matter who it's with. If you have an unhealthy relationship with God, you're going to have an unhealthy relationship with members. You're going to have an unhealthy relationship with your family, your friends, your spouse. So, you know, with that same tone, I like to, just personally, you're mentioning about what do we do kind of in meetings and so forth. I mean, number one, I like to communicate. When you're sick of saying it, this is what I want to tell you. This is what I believe. But when you're sick of saying it, you've said it so many times that you're sick of saying it. The people that are listening are just now getting it.
Yeah, good point.
And so, and then listen. Really just take it in, because you know if you don't have that feedback piece of communication, then you're not getting it.
Yeah.
If I'm not giving you feedback, I'm really understanding or checking for understanding. Did I hear you say that XYZ? I love to brainstorm. I think that a lot of times the answers to the issues that we face are in a consensus. Listen, this is what I think might fix it, but maybe you have a better idea. I want to listen to what you have to say after every event, whether it's a Bible school or whether it's, some outreach thing, whatever it is, to sit down with the people that were involved and have after action review where they are giving feedback and they feel welcome to say whatever they want to say. You see, so
Yeah.
we're building that safety and we're allowing the communication to take place and we're being vulnerable. Well, I felt like that I wasn't welcome in this class or whatever. Well, you're creating this safe place for people to add value to the ministry that you're doing. And so it's not personal. Just take it in, write it down, and then you've got something you can improve on for the next time.
Yeah.
And I love the consensus and because we're telling people you matter, you belong here. Your voice is important, especially on the ministry team.
Yeah.
I'm not an elder. I don't. You're not an elder there. I mean, I'm not certainly a part of the team, and the elders are part of our team, and we all work together. And so certain of those belonging cues send that message to them that we're together, we're safe, it's okay to be vulnerable. Let's build a purpose together. Let's communicate. Let's solve the problems. Bring your ideas to the table, and let's eventually we'll make a decision and move forward.
Yeah.
Of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And so you're modeling that behavior that you wish to see.
Man, great stuff, Stephen. I can't thank you enough for joining us. I mean, this is good.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I hope that for me, somebody kind of whet my appetite years ago, and I hope that maybe if some of this stuff is new or whatever, I hope that it whets your appetite to dig in, because it really can listen, you can be the soundest church in the world.
Yeah.
But if your culture is unhealthy, I just wonder, are you really as sound as you think you are?
Yeah.
If people don't feel like they can belong and become there, we tend to just think just this doctrinal thing. We should get that thing right, but there's the attitude, speech, and behavior of Christ. If that piece is missing, then
no doubt,
there's a missing piece for sure. So, Chris, I really appreciate the work you're doing, and not only in Texas, but we're just optimistic about the future here. We're excited to have you and look forward to spending more time with you.
I'm excited about that too. And I want to let our viewers and or listeners know that if you're ever in the Dyersburg, Tennessee area, stop by and see Stephen on a Sunday morning, or I'm sure you'd be willing to go out and get a coffee or something. West Dyersburg Church of Christ, great congregation, great place. Also, I want to tell you, if you have a question for me or Stephen about this episode, then feel free to let me know. You can reach me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com, and we will make sure that if it's specifically for Stephen, that it gets passed on to him, and I'm sure he'd be willing to answer and any kind of question you have or comment. We just thank you so much for tuning in. Stephen, thank you for being with us again. Appreciate you, brother.
Hey, thank you, man. And we've got a little resource, 25 ideas to help build healthy church culture. And if people are listening and want that, we'll get it out to them. No big deal. That just an idea, share some practical ways that will help you. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate the work you're doing, brother.
Absolutely. Appreciate you too. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.